Welcome back to the Good Eye Podcast. My name's Jay Smack, your host and producer, and today my guests are Shannon Ross and Ramiah Whiteside. Shannon is the leader. He heads up an organization called The Community, the president of The Community, which he started in 2014 while serving a 17-year prison sentence in Wisconsin. He was released last year, and he has dedicated his life to spreading positivity and communicating with the incarceration community, and that is where he puts his energies. The Community started as a publication, a circulation, and currently has 9,000 readers, mostly around Wisconsin, but elsewhere as well. So we also talked to Ramiah Whiteside, who also spent quite a bit of time incarcerated and now is doing the same thing, putting his energies into positive things. He heads up the organization Expo, Ex-Incarcerated People Organizing, and I met them at a meeting for the Alliance for Unitive Justice, which seeks to explore other means of rehabilitation rather than just incarceration, putting people away and locking the door, especially if they are, say, nonviolent crimes and things of that nature. But we get into all that in the conversation here. So here is my conversation with Shannon Ross and Ramiah Whiteside on today's Good Eye Podcast. All right. Shannon and Ramiah, welcome to the Good Eye Podcast. Appreciate you guys being here. Some quick background for everybody. I met Shannon and Ramiah, of course, as I often do, meet people with really interesting, often inspiring stories and doing good things in the world at a Synapse meeting. Synapse really kind of masquerades as a networking group, but it's really a group full of people who come together to try to help each other out. And networking it was never something I was ever that good at. As far as, hey, who are you? What do you got going on? What are you working on today? Here's my card. But rather, the umbrella of the nonprofits, I thought, was a perfect way to get people together who are sort of like-minded. On that theme, you guys are actually in Wisconsin. I'm here in Richmond, Virginia, and the work you were doing through the community, I thought was really interesting. I am involved with a nonprofit here in Richmond called the McShin Foundation, which I've mentioned. I know to Shannon, I don't remember if I mentioned that to Ramiah because we were messaging during the meeting. But they focus on addiction and recovery. And I think the cause and the work that you're doing and the cause and work around addiction and recovery are pretty interrelated in that they're misunderstood. Sometimes people who aren't touched by either the incarceration community or the addiction community, which really I can't imagine not being somebody, in your family. Even if you have a run-in that was completely out of your control, you're going to come in contact with that system. So that said, I found it really interesting and really inspiring what you guys are doing. So Shannon, if you wouldn't mind, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about the community, the work you do, your position within the organization, and we'll kind of take it from there. Eventually, I do want to hear some of your story and some of Ramiah's story, but right now, what's the community all about?
Yeah, the community has two focuses. So we have the newsletter that goes into about 9,000 incarcerated people right now in Wisconsin. It's become the most widely read publication in the Wisconsin prison system, even like with a newspaper or any other magazine that have nothing to do with anti-mass incarceration. And we also have an outside of prison focus with primarily the Correct the Narrative campaign. Little more things going on, getting started but right now that's the main one that is visual and has, things moving forward on it instead of just in a design stage. And that is going to communities that are more indifferent and antagonistic about people with criminal records and confronting them with our humanity, our successes, and our agency. So that's a mix of things that have been going on in the lives of people that have criminal records, things that are going inside with people that are currently incarcerated, that are successes and that are showing their potential as people that when they get out, what they can do. And then the agency aspect is just a lot of demonstrating that, we don't need you to give us things so much as we need you to get out of our way in a way that is restrictive unnecessarily, and is in a way that makes it very difficult for us to just recreate our lives or create them for the first time, in the case of a lot of individuals who never really had an actual life before they went in as a citizen or as a person outside of just a lost soul.
That's an interesting point, to engage communities unfamiliar with the incarceration community. What do you say to people who have the view of, well, this person made mistakes, they went into the incarceration system, they're out, why should I just look the other way? And I'm just playing devil's advocate here. How do you engage with them to help them understand that? And along that same token, do you focus on, say, nonviolent offenders, people of that nature, or is it to anyone? Because I imagine it's a harder hurdle the more severe maybe the infraction, if you get my meaning. So what do you do to engage people and help them understand, first of all?
A lot of that is what I want to discover as we go along, what works best in communicating with these populations, because it is one that those of us that are in this work don't have a lot of connection with. We're working with the Americans for Prosperity, somebody that is in that organization in Wisconsin actually just agreed to be a board member. So just an example of how I want to make sure that we have people who are familiar with communicating with that specific, those communities that are more conservative, more that are usually wealthier, usually whiter, but it's not just explicitly, not exclusively white, are the areas we want to focus on. And so that is a different type of communication and voice and wording that you have to have when you're going to these areas. Because like you said, they hear certain things that, those of us that are from the inner city or from communities that have more people that have criminal records hear. We hear different things with different words and different phrases. And so part of it right now is just getting out there, being seen. It's not even so much the argument or the conversation. It's more just being seen, because that simple aspect of having people in these areas that are doing things that are not associated with whatever the biases and fears are does a lot. People, they have a lot the way their minds work just off of interaction with you. They don't even have to, know a lot, but just seeing you does so much. I'm personally not like that. I don't need to see you. I can read and I can understand you because I understand myself. I understand human nature. I understand what it's like to be a flawed human being. And that tells me all I need to know about you. But a lot of people aren't like that. They have more of a need to be, have a physical connection or have some kind of presence in your life to see you differently. And so that's a lot of what we're doing. We just want to get in there. And I feel like just getting in there will allow us to learn a lot more about how to communicate these things. The main argument that right now I believe is going to be, what we will come at this with when people ask that and say things, is that we're returning to the community. I mean, 96%, something maybe even higher than that, of people in prison are returning to the community. And it may not be your community, more than others, but there will be some of these individuals either coming to your community to live, or if nothing else, to shop, to see people, to be connected to in some way. So who do you want to return? What type of people do you want to have as Americans, as in this society where they're going to have some effect on the state or the city or the tax bracket, or and whatever it may be, they're going to have some effect on you. And so are we as a society, are we promoting individuals that we want to have around us, or are we promoting just keeping them away from us? And that's a delusion. If you think that's happening, it's never happened and it's never going to happen. These people are, whether they live next to you or not, they're going to be having some effect on your life. And even besides that, if they, to a degree, weren't having an effect in your life, it has a way that it seeps into the way you treat people in your own community. If you're treating people who are across town a certain way, that is a direct impact in the way that you treat people in your own community and in your own family. So it all is this holistic sense of, what are you promoting within yourself as well? It's not only what are you promoting across town, what are you promoting within your own life, your own family, and your own mentality as a human being who has understanding and who has an ability to grasp the complexities of mistakes and of flaws and of moving forward in life beyond the simple made a mistake, get away and stay away, because it's not that simple. I think you asked one other question as well about about who are we focusing on. a lot of focus on nonviolent offenders. That term, and I'm sure Ramiah would fully agree, is so much crap. It's hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
There is no such thing as a nonviolent offender. That's just a term. It's a political phrase used only to apply to people that are more palatable to help. When the reality is that people that have violent offenses are more likely to be of the mind that you would want to return to society than the people who did a year or 2 years and keep coming back, and they never have the actual time frame inside where they are incentivized to become somebody different or to grapple with the realities of spending so much time away from society that, damn, I really do need to change. You see that more from people who have done a lot of time, who have committed a violent crime, because they have changed and they've been forced to see that. So it's something that we will never have any kind of actual change in any criminal justice system if we're not focusing on everybody. And primarily, it should not be nonviolent. It should be the violent offensive, the population of people who have committed violent offenses, because they make up a much larger degree than the people who have nonviolent offenses. That's another myth in there, is that we just solved the drug war problem. And no, there's most people in prison are in there because of a violent offense. And you need to face that. You need to grapple with that reality that people commit them, not monsters, not super predators, not, people that we can just put away in a corner and never see again. These are people that commit these crimes, and they need to be handled in a way as people so they can return as people that you would want in your society.
That's a really interesting point. Quote unquote nonviolent offenders. You could roll embezzlement or something like that, or pyramid scheme or something like that into that bucket, and I guess you're not really incentivizing anybody under that moniker to come out and, boy, did I learn my lesson, as opposed to someone who maybe got caught in a fit of rage or was attacked themselves and committed a crime and got convicted for it and had to do some time, having the motivation or the incentive to come out and really be a productive member of society, as opposed to somebody with the math knowledge and the business knowledge to come out and do what they did before all over again. And of course, you mentioned the drug war, which is its own kind of bullshit. On that note, where do you come down on the incarceration industry, as it were, privatization of prisons and things, and how do they affect, in your mind? And maybe this isn't something that that you can speak to. I don't know, but it always seems weird to me that you have some state facilities, some private facilities, because they're incentivized to have people in prison in order to satisfy a bottom line. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I want to make sure I leave enough of this steak for Ramiah to bite into, because it's a big one. But it's definitely, just to touch on something we just talked about also with the nonviolent offender term, is that people who also commit violent offenses become nonviolent more than people who commit nonviolent offenses continue to be violent. That's just another part of it that's also very interesting, how the terms, it's just, in so many ways it's made of sand, or it's made of, it's hollow, or however you want to term it, it's crap. And so the prison industry, in terms of private versus public, I've fielded that question a couple of times since I've been out, and people feel like, oh yeah, the private industry is a problem. It's not really. It's a problem, but it's not the problem. And it's not even enough of a problem to really have the focus. It's a distraction. Because if you take away all the private prisons, all the people in those private prisons are going to go to public prisons who are barely any different. It's just, it's just something the state does to save money, maybe. They're probably not even saving a lot of money. They're probably just getting somebody that they're cool with money because they run CCA or whoever the hell company they got to come in and take over. Wisconsin actually has, I believe, a law. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, Ramiah. I think they have a law where they actually can't currently have private prisons. We've never had private prisons in this state. There's an interesting story with Stanley, where private industry created a prison called Stanley Correctional, maybe, I think it was 2000. And the state said, no, we don't want it. And the private industry, or whoever it was, still created it and then kind of coerced the state to buy it from them. So it's just a whole bunch of funny, interesting stories about how that all happens, but I don't feel bad for them. But the bottom line is that private prisons is not really an issue worth even looking at. Prisons is an issue. And when we get into this situation of, private is worse, and we need to have all these entities who are taking care of people and correcting them should be under the public umbrella, the prison industry, period, isn't the way to approach it. There's so many flaws with how we are looking at that makes it more of the issue versus who's doing it. It's that it's being done. There's a different way to approach it. And there's a variety of different culture changes that need to occur to have any kind of solution.
That's a good point. And the larger heading of that can be applied to anything. Deal with reality on reality's sake. The fact that there's private or state or public prisons is just a distraction. That's really well put. Ramiah, how did you guys come together? First of all, and second of all, tell us a little bit about your story.
Okay. The first one's probably a little easier. I met Shannon, as you know, we were both incarcerated at the same time in at least one facility, and we, kindred spirits, we were in different programs that requested that you use your brain before brawn type stuff. So like writing classes, poetry workshops, things of that nature, computer classes, the intellectual side of things. So we met there along those lines, and we just started having a conversation like, what if? And then we would look within the prison courtyards or the prison day rooms, and there's so much untapped or wasted potential. And we would always just have these ongoing conversations of what if. And, Shannon followed through with one of his what ifs, and that's, him along with other people within his support system, they created the community. It all started from what if and wanting better, wanting to have some intellectually and pro-socially captivating versus what we were subjected to within those confines. So we, kindred spirits, like-minded, we always had very healthy conversations, but we wanted more. That was our motivation. We wanted more, and we also wanted to have some type of redemptive value to being incarcerated. We could have did time and, stood on our head and did what a lot of people choose to do, which is avoid the reality of, okay, make amends, get some redemptive value out of it, and keep moving forward. That he's got a hashtag, keep moving forward, something to that effect. So that's how we met. We just had ongoing conversations of wanting to do something different, something better, because we had already hurt the community, no pun intended. We had already hurt our families and our support systems. So we wanted something other than to continue to perpetuate that cycle. So that's how we met. And as far as my background, I did 25 years, and I did just about every prison in Wisconsin. And my background, I grew up in the urban area, highly poor, just not a lot of upward mobility. And let me give you a preface. These are not excuses. This isn't to say this is the reason why I, ended up the way I did, or that was why. These are factors. These are the same ingredients that Shannon and I and other organizations, we'll take those same factors and combat them so it won't be the same result. So we can systemically change some things where I won't be able to say, well, I sold drugs because I couldn't get a job. Okay, let's be realistic about this. When I did sell drugs, I made a choice to do that. Okay, so what Shannon and I do, and I work with Expo, which is ex-incarcerated people organizing. So I am that, Shannon is that, I'm a directly impacted person. We network with our people coming home and say, hey, you want to get a job? You need some connection, some network to get back and forth to the job. You need some skills, uplifting. We want you to plug in and get that to be accessible to some of that upward mobility, which is what was missing in the early part of the 80s and, when the war on drugs and all that stuff happened. So what we do is address those systemic issues to say, okay, we do the best we can locally with nonprofits to say, all that stuff's true. Literally, Jay, I can walk outside this house or this door you see behind me, get my vehicle, get pulled over and make the wrong move and I'll die. That's a reality. What we do is take those realities of living in the inner city of Milwaukee or wherever that urban area is and say, you know what, it is messed up. But if you do your best, and we will do what we can as a community, as these different organizations to help you succeed versus just saying, oh, well, that's not my backyard, can't do anything for you. So that's some of what we bring to the table of not making any excuses for the systemic issues or not giving anybody a free ride for making those choices, that we made that, landed us in prison. So we don't do that off the bat. And back to the whole nonviolent, violent thing and the private prisons versus the public ones, all that's just language.
Mm-hmm.
That's just verbiage. At the end of the day, and this is what I learned just a day ago, I'll be brief, and this is the core of Shannon and myself. I went to pick my niece up. I'm grateful for being home after 25 years, and I'm blessed to be able to articulate there's a better way. So with that direct experience, that's what Shannon and I bring to the table. You can have all the professors in the world that do the political education and the criminal, they can do all that. That's book knowledge. We have hands-on knowledge, both sides. So I'm grateful to be home, and this is what I value about being home. I was picking my niece up from a bus terminal just a night ago, and I didn't actually know where the terminal was. I got kind of mixed up, and it wasn't late at night, but I came up on a homeless guy, and he was asking for change or whatnot. And I uploaded this on the LinkedIn thing because I wanted to share it with people. This is the core of what we do and why we do it. I didn't have any change, but I kind of needed some directions. And I had to make a decision because you don't trust everybody. I'm not naive about the world we live in. But I said, you know what? I want to offer him something. It was cold. He didn't have gloves, so on and so forth. And I can tell he probably has some mental health challenges, but I second guess, maybe he'll rob me, maybe something will happen. Don't overextend yourself, Ramiah. But I said, you know what? I know what it feels like to be homeless. And there are some squad cars within the direct vicinity. So I had a backup plan. I helped him. I took him to a local area and I got him something to eat. I went to a gas station. I got him some gloves and I got him a face mask that's rubber for winter. Here's the point of all this. All I did was paid it forward from the people who visited the gulags of our incarceration system and said, Ramiah, we don't condone what you did, but we forgive you, we love you, and we're going to continue to hold you accountable. That's the difference from what we do as nonprofits and people who have lived experience, who have survived, and what the opportunists say, lock them all up and never give them a chance. Shannon and I are not the exception. We're the norm. The majority of people returning home have that same intrinsic value within them to do the same thing that I did. His name was Rakeem. Give the man a leg up. Be careful about it, but give the man a leg up. And I probably talk way longer than I wanted to, but that's the gist. That's what Expo does as an organization. And it's similar, and we collaborate with the community all the time of giving people a fair shot. They'll make their own way. We're not asking for handouts. We're saying we are some of the hardest workers you'll have. You wanna know why? We got that scarlet letter hanging, we got that albatross hanging over our neck for the rest of our lives. Therefore, we're more committed and invested in doing the right thing because we still have that whole redemption thing. And that's for the rest of our lives. So we network and help each other be successful. And all we want from you, Jay, and others who are listening or others who see us, give us a chance. Give us a chance.
Yeah. And what you guys represent in organizations like you, and we have a guy here locally, David Boyce, who does the same thing. He's got some ministry outreach. He did 27 years for a murder he did not commit. He was eventually exonerated with DNA. But what I think is great about the work that you're doing, it's hard work. You know, you're pushing a boulder up a hill because people have their notions of what they think they know without ever having come in contact with it. And plus, you're promoting wellness and spirituality, maybe not directly, but on a certain level, in an age when it's popular. You know, spirituality, mindfulness, it's popular. You know, you see all these motivational poster things on social media, and people like to get on their righteous horses of spirituality. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's better, you know, it's more positive than the opposite. But what I love about what you guys are doing is that you've walked it, you've been there, and you're reaching out with kindness and productiveness. And that brings me to a question, Shannon, I had, and either of you can speak to this if you like. I had a note here when we talked a few weeks ago about the coding vocational program. If you could talk a little bit about that. That's one of the things you guys are talking about. as far as paying it forward and trying to better yourself either while in or after getting out, teaching skills to people in the incarceration system. What is the coding vocational program? Is that something you guys are directly involved with, or just an example you were using?
So there's currently about 5 of them across the country. The Last Mile works in California. Chris Redlitz started it. They maybe 4 years ago they started it, and they actually, they teach coding in the prison system. And then at the end of it, they have, I believe, a pitch session where you can actually pitch an idea you have for a business. So it's a comprehensive program where they're not only getting you this skill, which is a highly lucrative skill nowadays when you get out. And I think it's a perfect match with the STEM fields and people that have criminal records, because you have this need of employees or workers in STEM, and you have this need for work in those with criminal records. And then you have among the people with criminal records, when they're inside, you have this massive free time to get them trained on whatever STEM area, works best, a variety of them, if that. And so we're just trying to bring that model to Wisconsin. And it's an interesting time in Wisconsin. Wisconsin is the backwater of criminal justice reform when it comes to the country. They just have decided they want to be over time the last to get in line with what is so obvious, and conservative and liberal Democrat administrations around the country have been doing for a while. And I would say that what's been done in criminal justice reform around the country is just nipping at the bud. It's just, trimming at the branches in so many stages of it. But at least it's something. Wisconsin has done nothing. Literally, there's been no legislation whatsoever since they put in truth in sentencing in 2000. And even before that, it was just going downhill. So we have an interesting moment where we could, potentially, there's parts in place to jump far ahead of everyone else, because we've been so far behind. I think that's exactly what has to happen to make up for it. But there's a position right now where we're in with some of the people that are in specific political positions in the state, and the momentum and some of the national efforts coming here this year. It's going to be a very interesting year to jump far ahead of where everyone else is at, and have, our former governor, the one who installed truth in sentencing, who was integral in having people who were in parole end up doing way more of their time than they were ever supposed to do. There was an actual memo he put out basically saying, keep them in as long as you can, even though they were sentenced to get out way beforehand. The judge intended them to get out at 15 years. So now we're going to try and keep them 25, 30, because that's just what the momentum in the country was at the time with, the tough on crime crap. And so we have a moment where that specific governor is saying he wants to create 2 prisons that are specifically prison universities, where people in there are learning all the time at a variety of levels at a higher education degree. We have right now a setup going on where Marquette just got a Carnegie Mellon grant for a significant amount of money. And they are having a blended platform where people with criminal records, people who are formerly incarcerated rather, are going to be teaching courses at Marquette to people. And they're going to be going into prisons to be teaching as much as they can. So there's this, with that, and with our current governor, as frustrated as we've been with him, it's something that if he is open to doing things, and we have legislators who are open to doing things, and we might be able to get some real change. And educationally, we can really have a strong impact in getting into these prison systems and having something like a coding vocational or other STEM fields taught that are really useful skill sets when you get out, versus some of the stuff that's in there like custodial and building maintenance, where they're just making birdhouses, and Microsoft Suite, where they're just learning 10-year-old technology, and it's not really applicable to the real world. So we can do a lot with that, and that's just one example of what we want to get set up. And we have that platform right now, and that interest that it could be very good. Could be.
Here's a question for you. Speaking of that line of thinking, education, et cetera, where do the trades play in to the incarceration community? Because it's pretty widely known that there is a real shortage of tradespersons, carpenters, plumbers, et cetera, and they're trades companies, whether again, if it's a carpenter or plumber, metal workers, et cetera, steam fitters, they're paying people to come work for them and paying them to be trained. Is that playing into the incarceration community as a quote unquote second chance option or anything like that?
I'll let
I'll
Ramiah
say
answer it.
briefly with this,
Yeah.
because it's a direct experience for me, lived experience. I was learning machining, and now I haven't done it in so long, forget the term for it, but basically blueprint reading, things like that. I never finished, but I started learning while I was incarcerated. And because I had that experience and I was at work release, and what work release is means you work while you're still incarcerated, you go to work, but you come back to the center, you sleep, next day you go back to work again. So it's like Huber. While I was doing that for roughly a year, I learned machining. I learned a trade. So I learned it while in, and this is the data I want to get to you, or the statistic. Well over 90% of the people who get a trade don't recidivate. I'm one of them. I kept that same job after I was released for about a year. And the only reason I went to another job is because I do this now, community organizer full time. So that's the only reason I transitioned. But working with computers and reading blueprints and the machining, all that, the carpentry, the plumbing, all that, more than likely, more often than not, those people who return to the community do not recidivate. So they do offer some of those certifications and those traded skills forms, not enough. So if they could also throw coding in there and the STEM stuff, awesome. You guys are winning because you're coming out with a viable skill. And if you look at the data, look at the stats, those individuals don't recidivate. A good paying job, I can speak for my experience. I pay my taxes. I've never paid taxes before, not like, store taxes or whatever, but I've never put in a W-2 or any of that stuff for the first 40 years of my life. I have that experience now. So now I can buy into our system. I can buy into our community from a skill that I learned while incarcerated. So like I said, investing in those opportunities, it's a win-win. Just look at the stats. So yeah.
That's cool. As far as you said, you've now transitioned into this full time, and I touched on this with Shannon a couple of weeks ago. As far as getting the word out, because we had talked about how it's tough to get the word out and convince people of your cause. I said, well, what about lobbying? Would that help? And he answered it perfectly. He said, well, I wish that we didn't need lobbyists at all for anybody to listen to us, which is really more the case. But how do you guys go about getting the word out? You say engage people, confront with your humanity, et cetera, et cetera. And are there other organizations in other states that you cross promote or cross engage, cross event, however you want to put it, with? How do you get the word out?
So on my part, it's just been a lot of cold calling, reaching out. I mean, it seems like in the 3.5 months, I never even said that. I did 17 years in, and I just got out 3.5 months ago. And so I would say easily the most of my time when I'm not sleeping, like 70% of my time, has been talking to people about stuff like this around the state and the country, just trying to create that awareness, even amongst other organizations that are in this work, about what we're doing and about what things we're working on. And so that's a slow process. I feel like I'm right now being forced to really become familiar with social media. I hate it.
Yeah.
Because I really do not like being involved in that whole circus, but it has a very big strength about reaching people. And so if I'm serious, I need to know that. That would be doing what I think is the issue I have with so many traditional organizations if I don't do social media, because I feel like a lot of organizations want to keep going at things the way they've been going at them instead of adapting to a world that is not trying to hear that language that they're speaking still. And so I need to get into that. And that's what I'm going to be doing this week, is really getting a good grasp of that so that I can know how to reach people with content and with, good content, not just crap, just to be reaching people. So that's, so far for me, has just been the old fashioned way of making calls and emails. And now I need to get in the new fashioned way of social media.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's, in addition, just piggybacking on what Shannon said, like this platform is one, the Synapse and the hubs, and that's another one. And okay, the whole social media thing. So that's one where we stay interconnected with other organizations, other nonprofits. Expo works with Wisdom, which has affiliates all over the state of Wisconsin. That's a Gamaliel network. We have worked and trained with people from the CZI network. We've worked, and included in that is the FICPFM, which is the formerly incarcerated convicted people and families movement. So with JLUSA, the ACLU, so we work with different platforms when we come together more often than what people might imagine. The women's suffrage movement, lately, because of our last political cycle and whatever happens later on tonight, my program specifically, which was RVP and it was IVE related, which is the integrated voter platform or relational voter platform. I'm still doing that work with the currently incarcerated men and women within the state of Wisconsin. And the gist of what that is we educate people on our democracy, period. So we encourage them to educate their people on our democracy. And then what ends up happening, educated people vote. So the program that I was the director of was highly successful. And I'm only gonna quantify that by double and triplicate, as that's what I get paid for now, is to make sure people are educated, make sure people are getting access to what they need to be successful. So yes, we coordinate with a lot of other nonprofits down in Florida, California, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Michigan, Minnesota, Iowa. So yes, I mean, and this platform right here will only help us to engage in a much broader perspective, because the irony is every state in our union has at least one prison. So why aren't we united on making these things better?
It's a really good point about educating people about their own democracy. It seems a little bit obvious to say, if you're incarcerated and you have access to educational resources, maybe learn a trade or learn computer skills or something like that, but just understanding how the system works. I mean, there's a reason lawyers make so much money, but everybody thinks they're necessary evil. But man, when you need one, they know the system.
Yes.
Well, cool, guys. I appreciate your time. I'm not rushing you off. If there's anything else you'd like to hit, but it's fascinating to me because it's an issue that you just don't hear about that much. Again, back to the addiction thing, because that's sort of my experience, dealing with friends and family within that community. But you just don't hear about it that much, and you don't understand what people are dealing with, as well as the obstacles to them, quote unquote, being, rehabilitating themselves or being productive members, or, what was the word you used again, Ramiah, as far as not going back into the system? Recidivism?
They don't recidivate.
Yeah, recidivate.
So, and with that, Jay, one of the, because being, with having an experience with substance abuse and those issues, one thing that keeps me grounded, keeps me sober, because I always encourage the people that I mentor, some of them, actually most of them have mental health challenges. And up to this point, all of them, I'll correct myself, they've all had substance abuse issues and all had mental health challenges. And I'm one of those. And I'll speak from my direct experience. What keeps me grounded, keeps me free and sober, are the connections I have. Mm-hmm. I surround myself with like-minded people, but also you're able to go into a program setting or a support system via Zoom or in person and say, man, today was a struggle. I was angry, I was depressed, I was down, and I thought about a drink. I thought about using, but what they remind me, and I still have mentors, I still have people that help me, get to the next day. They give you real, honest, transparent feedback. They remind you where you've come from, where you want to go, and it's those groups. It's kind of like a VA group for people that have never been in the armed forces. So I plug into that because I want the same for Shannon that Shannon wants for me. So I've got a hotline I can call, with Shannon's one, Jerome Dillard's one, Tamara. These are people who those are two of my mentors now, who anytime, and they're also expo people, I can call them and say, I'm struggling. You be transparent. People always, we shame ourselves when we admit, I thought about it. I struggled. I saw other people partying or doing what they're doing or whatever, and I thought about it. Or stuff sucked so bad today. My wife was tripping and the grandbabies were this and my cat ate the dog, whatever. I had a horrible, screwed up day. And I'm mad at the government. I'm mad, not in a bad way, but we can get mad at the government sometimes. It's legal. Or I'm mad at my boss. I'm mad at everybody. I don't want to do anything but drink or go do something. But I know what the consequences are. So what I'm sharing that with when I mentor people, we have those discussions. Today sucked, but do you know what my history is, Jay? The last time I killed 4 people. That's the reality. So I carry that around with me, and I carry that reality of that is it. They never come back. I'll just give you a little bit. I was involved in a high-speed car chase. I was under the influence. And one thing kind of piggybacked off the other: mental illness, substance abuse, and making the choice to be in a vehicle ahead of time while under the influence. But I had already lived a life growing up, using substances and whatnot. I was born into it, and then I made the decision to continue to use. So knowing that and being able to talk to somebody or a support group and not have to feel shame or guilt or just to feel included, that's something that led me years ago from not talking to Shannon or not talking to you or not talking to my local church member, because it was a shame thing. I'm no longer ashamed to admit and be transparent about the fact that I have addiction issues or substance abuse history. I'm not gonna run from that. So now I allow people the safe space to be who they are, where they are, and I offer my hand to help them get to where they want to go.
Man, powerful words. And you nailed it when you used the word. This is the word I keep coming back to whether it's, incarceration or addiction and substance abuse, and that's connection. Connection is so important for all of those things and for everything, really, whether it's connection with each other, connection with spirituality, a higher power, whatever you reach for, whatever you're feeling, connection is so important. And there is a book I can recommend if you're interested in this subject called Chasing the Scream, and it's about the drug war and the early days of the drug war and how it was targeting people. Specifically, Billie Holiday was brought up. And in it, they say the opposite of sobriety is not, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. And connection can go so far towards bridging those gaps, bridging those chasms of self-destruction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, fellas,
Yes,
again, I'll leave it open if you want, but I appreciate your time so much. This has been fascinating and beneficial, and I always invite an opportunity to learn. You guys are constantly teaching, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was funny when you mentioned about, I think of a story that David Liners that works with Ramiah at Expo, when he was at a Jewish foundation, and it was a Jewish organization, something like that. And he was talking about the COVID problem in prison system, how it's, by far, it's much worse than it is out in society in prisons. Like, I think we're currently in Wisconsin, close to 50% of the people have had it. And they can't get away. There's no way to social distance. There's the mask situation is not a solution. And a lot of things that the DOC will say they're doing that they can maybe technically say we're doing it, but in reality they're not really doing it. Just the way a lot of the wordplay. And one of the people that he was talking to, one of these older women, says, this is terrible. Why is nobody talking about this? And David's like, well, I feel like it's all I talk about. I don't know how. I don't know what more I can do. And so that's kind of how it is. I think Ramiah agrees that, we deal with this so much. We're talking about this so much, and it is something. It's like, how do we reach people in a way to really get them to see it? Because, clearly what we're doing is not enough. Something else has to happen. So it's just trying to find ways to leverage our resources and the interest that people have in it, so that we can maybe get the word out more, or at least more effectively. But I feel like it's all I talk about a lot of times, and still somehow there's a large swath of the population that doesn't get it, it doesn't understand it, or doesn't care.
So what she should have said was, why is no one hearing this? As opposed to, why is no one talking about it?
Yeah, true.
And I agree with that. So it's like these thank you, Jay. Thank you for the platform. This is awesome. Anytime we can this is an extension of exactly what we did years ago when we were together behind the barbed wire. And it's a blessing to be able to have these conversations with everybody else. So, the more we do this, the more people it's a slow wave at first. It's just a little bitty ripple, but it also it intensifies as it goes out. So that's what keeps me hopeful. I mean, he's a living testament. I'm a living testament of what's possible, you know. So, and I'll close, and because I know we have other things to do or scheduling things. But here's what's fascinating to me: when I can be in the same room with a Ron Johnson or a Jared Kushner or Alex Lazary. Alex Lazary is the vice president of the Milwaukee Bucks, which is the basketball organization. I mean, the neighborhood I grew up in, which is Hillside Housing Projects in Milwaukee, right down the street in that same neighborhood, where I used to go to the Ambrosia Chocolate Factory when I was 5 years old and get a handout of chocolate because I was hungry, and they always used to throw their extras out daily. Same neighborhood, Ambrosia Chocolate Factory is long gone. They tore it down. Now there's Pfizer Forum where the Milwaukee Bucks play. Here's the connection. I grew up destitute, poor, all of the above. There's no way you can script a story that me, Ramiah, would be rubbing elbows and with the ESPN shoot with Alex Lazary, vice president of the Milwaukee Bucks, after I've hurt the community as much as I did, and still get to come back and say, not only am I sorry, what does that mean? What does that look like? So here's why I brought that up. It's possible. I'm living proof. Shannon is living proof. All we're doing is bringing to you, Jay, and your audience the possibility of there's more like us. We didn't break the mold. So we'll continue to be on these platforms and share our stories and share that same hope that put us in these venues. So I appreciate it, man. Good seeing you again, Shannon. I'll see you in person shortly. And I look forward to doing this again, Jay. This is awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You guys are great. I appreciate the work you're doing. Appreciate your path and your dedication and making time.
Awesome. Take care.
All right, fellas. Thank you so much. Thanks to Shannon and Ramiah for their time, attention, and intention. And, of course, you can check out all the links and stuff that they referenced on the show notes page. You can go directly to goodeyepodcast.com. It's all within my website at jsmack.com. I encourage you to do that and hit me up with any feedback you might have. Thank you very much for your attention today. And if you have any ideas, thoughts, contributions, want to be a guest, want to have a conversation, let me know. This show's all about positivity, not blind positivity, but intellectual honesty, having conversations that can eventually, hopefully, produce productive results. So hit me up at goodeyepodcast@gmail.com or directly at j@jsmack.com. And until next time, thanks for listening. Try to look at life with your good eye.